Welcome to our weekly program of discussion. We call it Moral Side of the News, and we're glad you're alongside this week. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, a distinguished panel today, Rabbi Gaylia Rooks, the Temple, Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition, Reverend Jason Crosby, Crescent Hill Baptist Church, and Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. Our first topic, the Russian invasion and bombing in Ukraine continued to lead news headlines. President Biden traveled to Europe to meet all 30 NATO leaders this week as they hope to end the aggression. So now we turn to our panel on Moral Side of the News. What hope do you have for a peaceful resolution with Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I think, and other people have said this, I'm not sure it would even have occurred to me had I not read it, but they need to find a way for Putin to save face and realize he's made a huge mistake, that Ukraine is not going to just crumble, that the Ukrainian people are very committed to their own freedom and independence, that the world is not going to stand by as we did during Crimea. I think that Putin maybe thought that would happen again. So, a little bit of the blame is on us because, I got away with it before. Why can't I get away with it again? But I think that he has learned that this is not going to be the walk in the park he thought it would be. And I think that we need to find a way to help him come to the correct conclusion without totally losing face in the world, which kind of is sort of already done. But I think we should be able to come up with some way for him to come up with, okay, we're all going to agree to this, where it looks like some kind of a compromise that he hasn't just totally lost everything.
Yeah, you were asking about, in a sense, were we in terms of hoping for peace or not? I actually don't have much optimism short term. But I do hope that, given the level of meetings going on between NATO and assuming they remain united in their commitment to oppose that and continue, if necessary, even upping sanctions. But again, in this, for lack of a better term, modern world, sanctions also are limited because there's always alternatives. A lot of the news about China being able to be a back source to help take some of that pressure off. But similarly, as I was mentioning, to find a way that collectively, and it will only come about through talking, but I also am aware, at least according to news reports, that the Russian people themselves are sacrificing. There's so many deaths. As those reports come back, I would think it becomes a question of second guessing. What's the value of this? Why is my son, my husband, my grandson now dead?
My daughter.
Yes, my daughter. Yes,
Wife.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Yes, yes. And that's sort of the case with so much of the civilian casualties as well. But all those who are fighting in the military and the cost that is going to be impacting on individual families. Absolutely. So that too, I can be hopeful will have some pressure back on the home front.
Well, if I may just add in, I think there's a lot going on, and a lot of issues are coming into focus. One in particular is NATO. President Biden is meeting with NATO and mobilizing the NATO group. And I did a little historical research on NATO. NATO, for many of who may not be aware, was created specifically and exclusively to combat the threat of the Soviet Union. That's the only reason NATO existed and still exists, was for that reason. So it is telling also who is included in the NATO membership and who's not included in the NATO membership. I mean, who is in is as important. Who is out is as important as who is in. Of course, Ukraine was not a member of NATO from the beginning because they were part of the Soviet Union. But in later years, they had the opportunity of joining in, but never officially was admitted in as a member. So it's like you never know how important insurance is until you need insurance. And NATO was an international insurance policy against the threat of the Soviet Union and Russia. So that's one thing. And then Ukraine is finding itself in an odd position now by not being a member, and I'm sure wishing it had been a member all along. So that kind of puts it in a kind of a strange position. As far as negotiating with Putin, you can't negotiate with a madman. You're assuming that you can't reason with a person that's unreasonable, who does not have the capacity. Now, I appreciate what Gaylia mentioned. Create a scenario that makes it easier for him to maybe save face and concede, but he may realize that he made a fatal mistake. He won't realize that until power has been exerted in such a way that he regrets having made the move. So the only thing he respects is power. The sad reality is that the Trump administration coddled up, cozied up to Putin, and of course diminished the importance of NATO. So it was a 1-2 threat that was created by the previous administration. That's reality. So we come into to reap the whirlwind of that wind that was set in motion with the previous administration. So as far as hope, I'm hoping against hope that peace can be restored, lives can be saved, and no further destruction can be made. But that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm hoping against hope that could come to pass.
Thank you, Clay. I think an underlying factor in all this that connects directly to theological and spiritual matters, and to how we understand ourselves, the world, and truth, is the role of propaganda. The way in which Putin has effectively, seemingly, among the Russian people, been able to pitch this as some sort of crusade in order to buy support based upon largely propaganda, I hope will be a reminder to the American people of the dangers of authoritarianism, fascism, and the ways in which media narratives are complicated. They are complicated. Everybody is subjective and has different perspectives on things, but the way in which propaganda can influence an entire country, and then once that propaganda takes root and takes hold, things begin to move in motion that can lead to people dying, thousands and thousands of deaths. So I hope that we as folks of faith recognize the importance of free dialogue, of free exchange of ideas, of the importance of a free press, because underneath the threat of death to the Ukrainian people at the moment, it's undergirded by a propaganda machine, apparently that is at work and robust in Russia at the moment. And I don't know how we burst through that, how we break that wall, but I think that's going to be an important component to peace, not just in this particular situation. We've seen it in our own country. We've seen it in Europe. We've seen it with Brexit. We've seen the ways in which propaganda can flow across national borders with ease, and how that causes so much strife and disruption. And being able to deal with that is a really important component to reaching a peaceful solution in the long run.
A
And
lot
the
of
role that I was going to say, and the role of religious leaders in that process as well. In our country, religious leaders did stand up a number of times in concerns about the conduct of war. On the other hand, there's lots of examples where religious leaders have endorsed that kind of behavior. Look at Germany again, the Christian leaders who supported Hitler at that time, or in other ways in which religious leaders of all traditions have tried to oppose already. And certainly in the media, there's been a tacit, seems to be, support from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and also certainly the Russian Orthodox Church. And we've seen that in our country as well. I mean, religious leaders who also see themselves tied that concept of, I got to support the government because that's my people or whatever it might be, but to be able to step back and say you cannot justify ever bombing hospitals and things like that. And I can't believe anymore in modern warfare that's an accident. In the old days, you'd be sending missiles from 20, 30, 40 miles away, maybe, or rockets you're launching. Well, all these are laser guided. Nothing lands anymore, Harley, that you don't deliberately put where it's hitting. And people got to stand up. Religious leaders do too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Gaylia. Yeah.
I know. I want to add to your list. I mean, there are so many citizens of Russia who are putting themselves in harm's way, knowing that they're going to be arrested or worse for their demonstrations. Oh, think about that amazing newswoman who was carrying the placard across the state television news. I mean, telling people that, this is propaganda. And we know about the Russian propaganda machine. It's been at play in our country and done, in my opinion, tremendous damage for the past decade, for sure. But I wanted to comment on sanctions. I think, Father Bill, were you the one who said that there's only a limit to how much sanctions can do? I think that sanctions have done a lot. I think that they have really, really hurt. We only get 3% of our gas, of our oil for gasoline from Russia, and yet 3% of our consumption is huge. And I think that has made a difference. And we're recording on Thursday, so we don't know what's happening with the NATO summit yet. But Biden has been promising, or I'm sure Putin would say threatening, even more sanctions. So we don't know what those will be. And I just want to take one more minute to say, in case people haven't heard, that in terms of the Ukrainian refugee problem, the Roma people are really, really having problems here where they may not have passports, or I won't get into the whole deal, but if you're interested, the plight of the Roma, yet again, it is heartbreaking.
All right, we're often going with moral side of the news, and we're going to move on to our second topic because it's a busy week. Also making headlines, the first Black woman nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson faced questions and grilling during her confirmation hearings before the Senate Judiciary Committee this week. So turning to our panel, let's hear you weigh in on the hearings and the nomination.
Well, I haven't been following the proceedings in detail. I've been getting kind of excerpts after the fact. I hear it is quite, I guess, a political theater, particularly among the opposition, the Republicans who are part of that committee, grilling her. The key word is grilling, because that's exactly what they're intended to do, to grill, barbecue, and to eat her alive after the grilling is complete. And it's just amazing, some of the preposterous questions that are being asked of her. One in particular, since this is the moral side of the news, Lindsey Graham, of all people, asked questions about her religion and faith and so forth, knowing that it would touch some buttons with his base and people back home. But Judge Brown was very quick. She did answer the question respectfully, but she did also take him to school, and she did teach the nation about the requirements in the Constitution, in which there is zero religious test in the Constitution for these judges. So for him to raise that question alone was beyond the pale. But her response was most telling and insightful, I think, in these proceedings. Clearly, the intent is to diminish, degrade, insult. I mean, you know the play before it comes. I mean, you can see it from a mile away what they're going to say. But I think she's going to endure the process. She ultimately will be approved. She was approved by many of those. Lindsey being one, Collins, they already approved her for, I think, a lower level court. So they've already agreed that she is capable of being a judge, for the record. So you've got that for the record as well. So I think that it's insightful to see just what they say, but I have no doubt in my mind that she will ultimately prevail and be approved as a Supreme Court judge.
I think she's doing a brilliant job keeping her cool at some of the, I was going to say borderline offensive. I think some of them aren't even borderline. Ted Cruz, this one's my favorite. I actually wasn't listening during this part, but I read that Ted Cruz was talking about a book that they use in the private school that her children go to or went to. I think she's a board member there. It's called the Anti-Racist Baby book. And he's going, oh, do you believe babies are racist? And, you know, babies are not racist. It depends on how they grow up and to what they are exposed. And we have learned in my lifetime that even when you try not to be racist and you're raised in a household where racism is seen as a great evil in this country, there's still so much white privilege that you may not even be aware of things that are racist. And I just think that it's now the #1 book on the New York Times bestseller, and I just ordered a copy for my grandson. He may already have it, but I'll find a home for it. But the Anti-Racist book, how can you be against teaching little children not to be racist? I mean, we have to start them at the youngest age. But anyway, I think that she really keeps her cool. She's obviously incredibly bright and capable. And I mean, that was never really the question, was it? And she's not ever been accused of sexual attacks or inappropriateness. So you'd think there'd be a low bar, but I think she can make the highest bar. I really do.
I think so.
Yeah, Gaylia, I have watched with fresh eyes these proceedings in the wake of the awakening that has happened in our country over the past 2 years regarding racial justice. In the midst of a backlash to the racial advocacy, racial justice advocacy on the right, in the form of criticizing critical race theory. What struck me was the smile that she had on her face as white conservative senators were grilling her, as you said, Clay. And despite her impeccable record, despite the fact that Lindsey Graham and others had voted in favor of her nomination to the U.S. District Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia previously, for them to come out and grandstand and bring up all these other issues not related to her capacity to serve in this role, it was just another chapter for me to see the ways in which I hope people understand what Black women in particular have endured in this country. For her to be subjected to this and to keep a smile on her face, I think about the women who have been housekeepers, the women who have worked low-wage jobs, the women who have endured that kind of scrutiny outside of the spotlight. And when I look at her in that context with such a steady demeanor and such strength, I think to myself, that is the kind of leader and the kind of judiciousness that we need in our country.
I appreciate your summation there, Jason. But you mentioned low wage. You also include the fact that Black women have been a part of the no wage employment base of this country. So that's important to be aware of. They were part of the no wage delegation as well. And on top of all the other abuses being held as chattel property in a way that nobody else has in this nation. So you just add that to the long mountain of injustices that she is standing in the face of, and she's responding with a cool and collective resolve against it. So it just further me, I mean, having somewhat of a comical eye to observe the contradictions. And it's so preposterous that you've got to get a chuckle in the midst of it. That may be part of the smile that was on her face. She knows that, like King said, the arc of the modern universe is long and always bends towards justice. I mean, she knows that. So she's well aware of that. So I think that is the kind of, in my view, the quiet and enlightening resolve she's displaying in these hearings. And I'm sure she's going to prevail. Just the way she responds, in the way she's not spewing out, stomping the rostrum like the previous court. What's the name? The guy that was so angry in his hearings. I mean, she doesn't have the luxury of being that. So that alone exposes a privilege that's just not available to her.
Right.
So I think
white men can get angry, but
and
women,
and spew.
but women, the slightest bit of anger and it's a whole different, I won't even use the words. Yep. And all the more so for women of color.
Right. Absolutely.
And I would just add, it's a little, go ahead, Father Hammer.
Oh, okay. As we've been describing some of the hearings, I want to be up in front with everybody else, and probably like most people, I've not sat down and watched, during watch the channels where it would be available to you to watch the entire hearing. I'm relying on either news clips and or what I'm reading in the print media. But it's very clear it is very high political drama, and particularly on the part of the ones involved, on the senators involved in the hearing. But that's also been an ongoing, for lack of a better term, evolution. I mean, it's been going on through several presidential nominations, previous administrations going back 20 years or more. And the style of, it's a chance for me as a senator or as a person who's at this hearing to just talk on and make my political points and make my political view. It's just high drama.
And a lot of it seems to be about the upcoming election.
Right. On this particular situation, it's upcoming elections, but it doesn't always fall that way. But even some of the refusal to even have hearings in the past was all tied to elections. And so we have the situation where, again, yes, they're asking her in many ways some irrelevant questions. But having said that, I mean, it's not that I will agree with all of her opinions or her positions any more than I would agree with anybody on the Supreme Court, all their positions, all their opinions. But to be able to distinguish and recognize, as we've already affirmed, her ability already demonstrated, clearly demonstrated, and also the way she is, yes, able to manage her in a very hostile environment, her composure. Again, some of the past ones haven't been very composed. But again, that's a real testament to the kind of character that she will bring to this position. And I too expect that she will win this nomination, as she rightfully should. Even though I may not agree with each and every one of her positions, but as a whole, I think she will be a wonderful asset to all the justices when they're meeting in that room, making discussions about decision making.
I just hope and pray that sometime in my lifetime, we could get to a point where if you have a president from one political party that appoints a Supreme Court justice, that you will not have to have control of the House and Senate, control of the Senate. That's who confirms these nominations, I should say, to get a justice through. We have a broken system, and until we have leadership in place across the board that is willing to put values before political affiliation, I'm afraid what'll happen the next time, and this happened with Merrick Garland. You had Obama putting forth a nominee to a Republican-controlled Senate, and it didn't happen. And I fear that will continue to happen, whether it's a Republican president, a Democratic Senate, or vice versa moving ahead. And that is not good for our country.
You mentioned Judge Garland and Obama. While you're on that, I want to just mention, I kind of fought Obama. He should have fought that harder. Even if it meant suing to be able to get his nomination through. Appealing to another branch of government, Supreme Court, to weigh in on that whole process. That was really an unjust process for one man in the name of McConnell that could derail the consideration for a Supreme Court justice. I think Obama should have fought that tooth and nail all the way to the Supreme and sued the Senate to make that happen. I think that's the one regret that he should have pursued. He should have he should have went quote nuclear on that nomination. And I think that would have been a just thing to do. But and again, I agree with you, Jason. Until we get to the point we don't run up against these political walls, to pursue just procedural justice with appointments of judges and so forth, I think that it is a very sad day when we cannot expect that the system to work that way, the way it should.
Well, I'm not a Supreme Court historian, but I would have to believe the vast majority of our nation's history, that's been oftentimes the case. That the president has not been the same party as the one controlling the Senate. And I would think that it's been a matter of course that was always something they would work on and appoint, but I don't know how many past nominees have ever been rejected. That's just information I lack.
Merrick Garland, they were saying it was too soon, too close to the election, and the people should have the vote of it. And that's where President Obama really could have dug his heels in.
He should have dug in.
There were precedents for other administrations towards the end of their term, other presidents, and that confirmation has gone through. And Merrick Garland was, so obviously qualified, and it made me embarrassed, not for the first time, to be a Kentuckian with Mitch McConnell being the senator who really derailed that.
See, and then he failed to acknowledge the people did speak when they voted for Obama to be the president. So they spoke there. So he had the power invested in him by the people to do just that.
That's right.
So they undermined the will of the people by blocking that nomination.
And that, my friends, will bring to a close this episode of Moral Side of the News. Thank you to our panel, Rabbi Gaylia Rooks, Reverend Clay Calloway, Reverend Jason Crosby, and Father Bill Hammer for your time today. If you'd like to catch this program again or any episode from this past year, just jump on YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. And Moral Side is now a podcast. Just search for it wherever you get your podcast. Thank you, panel. Until next week, have a great week. In just a few months, we'll be celebrating the 69th annual WHAS Crusade for Children. But you don't have to wait. You can get involved right now by going to WHAScrusade.org. That's WHAScrusade.org, and make a secure online donation. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Moral Side of the News. We'll be back with an all-new conversation next week.